Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining our July meeting. This is the ASCE EWRI Seattle chapter meeting, the Environment and Water Resource Institute in Seattle. So this month, we're really excited to have Leslie Webster talk about the relatively new project that Seattle is working on. It's called Shape Our Water. We'll hear more about this project from Leslie in a couple of minutes. But before I pass it to Leslie, just a couple of reminders. We've been doing this Teams/Zoom meetings for over a year now, so we know the rules. Please mute your microphone, turn your cameras off so we have enough buffer for everyone. But please unmute yourself, turn your camera on when you ask questions. We would love to hear from you and see your face, get some feeling of in-person meetings that hopefully will return soon. Use the chat box. I'll be keeping an eye on that. If you have any technical issues or if you lost the audio or you can't hear Leslie speak, please let me know and I'll make sure that we resolve this. And then for this meeting will be recorded, and we typically post those meetings on our YouTube channel for those who can't attend to watch it after we're done. So that's all I have. Again, really excited to hear from you, Leslie. You know a little bit about this project, but I'm really excited to learn more about what the city is thinking about and how they're shaping our water for the next 50 years to come. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and Leslie, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Ayman. I really appreciate being invited here to share about Shape Our Water with you all. It's a great opportunity to share the good work of my team and SPU with a group of folks that obviously spends a lot of time working on these issues as well. So I'm going to get started sharing my screen. And, you know, Ayman and I were kind of joking about awkward virtual moments. I'm sure throughout this thing there will be moments where my microphone stops working or my dog starts barking or other things like that, so we can just laugh about those as they come and move on. We're all humans, but apologies in advance if you know something goes sideways. So is everyone able to see my screen now? Ayman, are you able to see my presentation?
Yep, I see the full screen.
All right, so I'm going to get started today with just kind of the basic overview of what Seattle Public Utilities does and what our drainage and wastewater line of business does, and then dive into an overview of the Shape Our Water project, which is a long-range planning project for Seattle's drainage and wastewater line of business. And I will pause after that to make sure we're monitoring the chat and doing Q&A. So like Ayman said, you're welcome to post things in the chat, and I'll take pauses and give you guys opportunities to ask questions. After that, I'm going to dive a little deeper into the different pieces of the project. There's a substantial analysis portion of the project and a substantial engagement portion that have been completed or on the tail end of completion. And so I'll kind of walk through the major deliverables and processes for those two different chunks of work, and pause after each of those two. And you know, it's been actually, I was thinking about this as I was putting the presentation together. It's been a long time since I gave a full hour presentation, or you know, most of an hour presentation on my work. I feel like in this remote environment, I often am giving like 10-minute or 5-minute blasts to people. So I do want to take those breaks too, just so that we can have a human moment and a pause and hopefully wake you guys up if I've started to bore you along the way. So drainage and wastewater is one of the services that Seattle Public Utilities provides. And many of you are aware of, for drainage and wastewater lines of business, you know, we maintain our systems, our infrastructure, and ensure that our water bodies are protected from pollutants. But we do a lot of other things as well, including reducing the sources of pollutions from home and businesses, preventing sewer overflows and backups and flooding. We do a lot of system monitoring to identify and understand potential problems. A huge part of our work is obviously regulatory compliance. And then we also have a real dedication to race and social justice. And we do a lot of work to ensure that we're prioritizing our improvements in the communities that need those investments most. Seattle's drainage and wastewater systems there's kind of, we describe them as being one of three different types. And, in the area, we're one of the largest combined sewer systems in this region, where both stormwater and wastewater run in the same set of pipes. And those pipes do overflow in large storm events at control points called CSO outfalls. We also have significant portions of the city that are managed using a separated sewer system, where there's separate pipes for sewage and for stormwater, where the stormwater goes to receiving water bodies directly and the sewage goes in separate pipes to the treatment plants. And then the Seattle special system is what we call a partially separated system. And this is in areas where we that were originally designed as combined, but over the years, as part of our management of stormwater, we separated the streets from the system. And so in these areas, the stormwater from the streets drain directly to our receiving water bodies, and the stormwater from parcels predominantly still goes to a set of historically combined pipes. But not as much stormwater ends up in those combined pipes, and the wastewater from houses also go to those pipes. So this is a little unique relative to other combined areas of the city. And as an overview, we have these stats here. About a third of our city is still fully combined, and a large portion is this partially separated system that I just shared with you. And then the smallest portion is these fully separated systems that were designed to manage the different types, the drainage and the wastewater separately. And there's just some overall stats here. If some of you work for other cities or have done a lot of work in other cities, like this kind of information on the right-hand side helps give you perspective on what Seattle does and doesn't manage. And we're one of the older systems in the state, so we have average age of our pipes being 80 years, which means we have a lot of challenges with maintenance and rehabilitation for our infrastructure. So in terms of, we're here today talking about planning, so I always like to start talking about where we've been, and the most recent planning effort that our drainage and wastewater line of business completed was this plan to protect Seattle's waterways from 2015, and that was predominantly a CSO control plan focused on water quality. So it incorporated a long-term control plan and an integrated plan together to show our regulators how we would achieve our CSO standard in the city. And that has really been the main driver for our capital investments for several years, because it is such a strong regulatory driver for Seattle. We are under a consent decree for our CSOs, and so just a very large portion of our investment and activities do focus on that one issue. We do have a wastewater system plan and a drainage comprehensive plan, but they're from 2004 and 2006, and so they're pretty old at this point. There are still some projects that we're doing that were identified in those documents, but overall, it's long past overdue time to reevaluate those. And as I pointed before, the main drivers for the work that we're doing now are really focused on things that are regulatory in nature. What we're finding is that a lot of things that aren't regulatory in nature are really putting a lot of pressure on Seattle and also on our drainage and wastewater systems, and will continue so into the future. So, we're already seeing the effect of climate change on the performance of our system. Population growth in Seattle has been a major factor. We are in an area that's prone to earthquakes, and as a utility that has some of the highest rates in the nation, as well as a city that is definitely grappling with affordability, affordability is a huge issue for our organization. You know, it's funny, when I was getting ready to do this presentation this morning, I was looking at this picture and realizing that it's probably from about 5 years ago. But if any of you know this area of South Lake Union, there's a lot of buildings in this picture that exist now that were not in it. Not in it when the picture was taken. And that just is a testament to how rapidly this city is changing. So as we're thinking about what is our plan for the future, how are we going to update our approach to providing drainage and wastewater services, we wanted to move beyond regulatory drivers and look not just at these sort of key service areas and regulatory drivers, but a lot of these pressures that are the effects of these pressures that we're facing now into the future. So you'll see we're adding for our planning effort, looking at seismic risk, climate change, growth, and of course, equity as huge drivers for the work that we do, in addition to a number of factors that are more typical for a utility like Seattle Public Utilities. So I mentioned affordability before, and it is a really huge issue for Seattle. You know, one of the things that we're really trying to accomplish is getting the absolute highest value out of each water quality or each drainage and wastewater dollar we invest. And so we started off on this planning effort with a theory that investment in water infrastructure can provide a whole host of other benefits. So we don't have to hide it. We don't have to bury it underground. We can leverage it to provide greater community health benefits, greater social cohesion, environmental justice. It can provide identity. It can create public space. There's a whole bunch of things that can be accomplished when we invest these water quality dollars. And this planning effort is really aimed at figuring out how to get that highest value out of the work that we do. So just to make it fun, I'm going to pause here for a second and show you guys a video. I realize now that I probably didn't share my screen quite right to do this so you can hear it. So I'm going to stop sharing and share it again so that you can hear it. And if you can't hear it, type up immediately because I can fix it. So this video is an overview of the Shape Our Water project that will provide kind of a background for the rest of the information that I'm going to share.
This city loves water. It's a part of us. Seattle wouldn't be Seattle without our rain, lakes, creeks, rivers, canals, and Puget Sound. Seattle Public Utilities is working on a plan for our city's water future. We're calling it Shape Our Water, a 50-year plan for Seattle's water resilience. And we want you to join us. Together, let's envision how we'll make equitable and environmentally sound drainage and sewer investments to take care of our water for the next 50 years. Over the coming decades, Seattle will face huge challenges and big planning questions. How do we manage our water in the years to come? How do we combat climate change, like heavier rain, hotter summers, and sea level rise? How do we reduce and manage water pollution? How can we build systems that can withstand an earthquake? How do we continue to provide excellent service to our ever-growing population? How can we address concerns about affordability and displacement? Together, we can turn these challenges into opportunities. We're engaging Seattle communities, especially those who haven't had the opportunity to shape government work in the past, to help shape the next 50 years of Seattle's drainage and wastewater investments. We want community priorities, your priorities, to help define how we face these challenges. This could mean building parks and open spaces that can hold rain during heavy storms, or using green stormwater infrastructure to connect to the natural environment in an urban environment. Let's imagine, plan for, and design innovative solutions for Seattle's future drainage and wastewater system that do more for residents and our utility. Water infrastructure work cannot be done alone. We need your partnership for smart, collaborative decisions. Please join us online for a speaker series featuring local and national leaders in early 2021. Events about our connection to water. And visit our website to find community stories and maps highlighting existing drainage and wastewater system projects that bring multiple benefits to communities. Learn more about Shape Our Water at shapeourwater.org or email us at shapeourwater@seattle.gov. Let's build a resilient water future together.
So that was our little intro video. My team made that ourselves, so it has a little bit of a homegrown feel to it, as you can see. But it was an introduction to the project that we used to try to get people interested in engagement. So some of those things that it was referencing have already happened, and I'll be going over them later in this presentation. So I know that most of you or many of you are engineers and practitioners. So here's the obligatory process diagram. Shape Our Water is broken up into a couple of different stages, and you can see we're about halfway through the project right now. And I'm going to go through each of these stages in the remainder of the presentation in a little more detail, or at least the first three in a little more detail. The analysis stage was focused on identifying and prioritizing issues and opportunities, and the visioning stage was about cultivating stakeholders and setting a shared set of goals and a shared vision with our community. And then the planning stage is where those two come together and we develop that long-range plan for the future. Just a little more background before I get into the details of those stages. One of the things that we did early on in this project was develop an intent statement. And we felt like this was really important because we are asking for a lot of participation and engagement with stakeholders in our community, that we wanted to be as transparent as possible about where we were coming from and what we were bringing as an organization to this process and to this project. So we developed this intent statement. You can see it's available on our website, the link on the top corner if you want to take a closer look at it. But it is our commitment in this process to value these different factors. So environmental stewardship, environmental justice, regulatory compliance, affordability, equity, having a basis of science and data for the plan that we're developing, a commitment to collaboration, and then empowerment of our community through this process. And in my knowledge, this is pretty unique for an organization to do in terms of wanting to just be, again, really transparent as a way of building trust with our communities and inviting them to the table to participate with us. And then another foundational piece that we did was we developed an equity framework for the project through a series of workshops that were led by some equity advisors for our project. And this framework articulates for us the racial equity values and principles of this project and gives us guidance for how we do our work together in the community. It also provides direction for how we'll make decisions and incorporate equity into the decisions we make in the practice of developing this process. And it designed in a couple of steps along the way where we would revisit this framework throughout the development of the plan and make sure it's updated and actively being incorporated into the work that we do. So with that, I'm going to dive a little deeper into this analysis stage, and this is one of those points when I'd love to pause and ask if anyone has any questions about this sort of overall overall approach of Shape Our Water before I start getting into some nitty gritty of what we analyzed and how we did it.
I have a question, Leslie. This is Brian.
Hi, Brian.
Yeah, just a question. I guess maybe you'll get to it. Just maybe it's more in the visioning part. But when the idea of cultivating a wide range of stakeholders to participate in a process, as something like Shape Our Waters or a lot of planning processes take a really long time. Historically, it's really hard to keep people engaged in planning processes because there's no one definitely impacted quickly around something. So I'm just curious how, what success or challenges you've had in sort of maintaining stakeholder engagement in such a long process. And maybe that's still to be measured as you're still like only partway through the process, but maybe you could speak to, how many people did you or stakeholders did you identify, and how many are really involved? And then are you concerned that those that are left and engaged are having a greater influence on the planning effort than others? And how do you balance sort of those that are engaged versus those you want to be engaged and aren't engaged? So I know that's a long question, but it's just something maybe you could address at some point this afternoon.
Yeah. That's a really good question, Brian. And I would love to cover it when I get into the visioning portion of the presentation, because I think it relates to the pieces that I have there. But the spoiler alert is I don't have a great answer to this question. What you're identifying is a challenge for us to do the work. But I do have some thoughts on it that I'd be happy to share.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any other questions before I move into the analysis piece? All right. So our analysis stage again was where we identified current and future risks and opportunities citywide, and we broke these different risks and opportunities into a couple of buckets. We looked at our system capacity citywide. We were looking in our city at water quality and aquatic health. We also looked at asset age or condition and maintenance challenges. And then we looked at challenges that we'll face in resilience. So maybe not as frequent of occurrences, maybe not something that you're not experiencing once a year, but something that can still have a really significant impact when it does happen. And then finally, we looked at the social, economic, and regulatory context of the work that we do. So not so much focusing on the systems, the drainage and wastewater systems themselves, but the human side and the city side of all of this work. So before I dive into each of those buckets, I want to, I mentioned the equity framework at the beginning, and I want to kind of pause to talk a little bit about centering equity in this analysis approach of ours. Seattle Public Utilities and a lot of other utilities across the nation primarily rely on complaints to understand where their system is and isn't working. And I'm sure you can all imagine that a complaint-based knowledge of our system function is biased towards people who have time to report issues, people who have a lot of access to information about how to report the issues. It's also biased towards people who trust that the government will do something about the challenges that they have. Typically, it's biased towards people with English language proficiency, because people who maybe aren't as good at speaking English wouldn't feel as comfortable calling to let us know that they're experiencing challenges. We also understand that people who are not citizens of the United States might be a little less likely to call government and say, like, I'm experiencing flooding. And then, of course, there's a wealth gap here. And we know as well that a lot of times these issues, these are some of the biases, but that people of color are more likely often to be the ones that fall into this camp of having being less likely to call in and let us know that our systems aren't working. And then it sort of self-perpetuates, because then we invest and make decisions about the information that we have and solve the problems in the areas where people are complaining and are letting us know that our system isn't working, and that continues to perpetuate these same inequalities over time. So for the analysis stage overall, and you'll see some of these pieces as we go through it, but we are more on models to identify our risks rather than complaint-based knowledge. We are using it to supplement our complaint-based knowledge, but see that models are identifying areas that we didn't know we were having flooding problems. We're also focusing our outreach around flooding and other sort of system issues around equity priority areas. So say the models identified flooding issues or sewer overflow issues in specific neighborhoods that we didn't know that they had ever experienced problems, and we went out and did outreach in those areas, especially where we have priorities related to equity, and ground truth those issues to see if they were true. And in a lot of cases, we did find corroborating evidence of these issues that we had not been aware of before. We've also incorporated racial and social equity into our prioritization process, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in an upcoming slide. And then we also are actively analyzing the current and historical causes of the racial social inequities. And all of this is so that we can give a voice to historically underrepresented communities and ultimately distribute SPU investments more equitably, so we're not part of this reinforcing loop that I talked about before. So with that, going into some of these different buckets, I'm not going to go through the details of these, each of these individual projects. This is represents, and I'm going to kind of breeze through here, represents a huge amount of work that over 85 people in SPU participated in developing all this analysis work. Brian, who asked a question, led one of these projects himself when he was at SPU. And there's probably a number of consultants like Iman on the call who've also participated in these. So just know that what I'm showing you is was a huge amount of work and was definitely a team effort. So here's where we're looking at system capacity of our drainage and wastewater systems that, you know, when it's not adequate, results in flooding and sewer overflows or sewer backups. On the water quality and aquatic health side, we looked at, you know, where our priorities were for investing in structural stormwater controls to improve water quality. We looked at pollutant load assessment of stormwater versus CSO discharges. We've looked at flow metrics in our creeks, the flashiness of our creeks and how that affects water quality. Looked at fish passage barriers, opportunities for floodplain reconnection, and then kind of the current state of our aquatic habitat in our city. And on the asset age maintenance, and as we just kind of a catch-all miscellaneous other projects, this is where work that's primarily done through asset management plans in our organization is being brought in. So we're looking at structural failure of our drainage and wastewater pipes, where in our city we have chronic maintenance challenges. We looked at a couple different system layout challenges, the miscellaneous bucket, a lot of different things that either create access challenges or maintenance challenges, ownership, potential integration to this stuff. We looked at our informal system, and that is not one of the three systems I shared with you at the beginning. This is areas of our city that are primarily served by a ditch and culvert system, mostly north of 85th and a small area in southern end of the city where we have just very special challenges with lack of connectivity and capacity in that system. And we also looked at sites where surface and groundwater can be causing challenges. On the resilient side, we looked at creek flooding in large storm events. We also looked at places in our city that experience significant flooding during extreme storm events. So like the 100-year storm type event. We looked at where we expect sea level rise, inundation to impact our city. We looked at where geologic hazards, so where landslide areas and liquefaction prone areas in Seattle are. We also did a seismic risk assessment where we looked at where our wastewater system had the greatest risks in specific seismic events. And then finally, we did an analysis of non-potable water use, looking for the areas where there's the greatest potential demand for non-potable water. And then on that social, economic, and regulatory context, we looked at the social and environmental systems of Seattle. So where are our current racial inequities in health, wealth, and environmental quality? We did a self-evaluation of partnership within SPU and looked at where we partner, where we don't partner with external organizations, and to help inform kind of where we would want to put more effort into partnerships in the future. And then we looked at our regulations and the sort of status of affordability within our city. So kind of a last thought on this analysis is that this is a lot of work that was pulled together. It was across a lot of work groups in different corners of our organization. So sort of a process of synthesizing and pulling together a lot of things that was developed by other work groups. And we attempted to provide some consistency to the prioritization approach across a lot of these. We were successful to this to some degree. Some of the projects are more follow this approach than others, but overall, this is the approach that we aim to take in prioritization across all of these different buckets. And it's a risk-based approach, as many of you are probably familiar with, of looking at the consequence of failure happening and how frequently you expect that failure, how likelihood that failure is to happen, to understand overall risk. We made the choice, and I spoke about this in the equity slides earlier, we made the choice toward the beginning to have equity be a standalone factor in this prioritization. We tried first incorporating equity into that consequence score, but there were so many factors for many of these issues wrapped up into that consequence score, like, is there a critical facility that's being impacted? Are there high pedestrian use areas that are being impacted? Is there an arterial being impacted? When you put equity in with all of those different factors, it kind of lost its signal in the overall score. So we pulled it out and had it be a standalone factor in the prioritization score overall. There is still variations in the approaches across all those different buckets that I was showing you and kind of walked you through quickly. And one thing to point out, there's still a very challenging piece that hasn't been done yet, which is how do you compare the scores across different issues? So for example, how do you compare, if you got a 30 for a flooding issue and a 30 for an SSO, sanitary sewer overflow, how do you compare those two to each other? And we have yet to figure that out. That's part of the steps that will come ahead into the future. But that's the question I always get asked. So I figured I would just preempt it, let you guys know we don't have an answer to that one yet. So I'm going to move on now to go through the engagement piece, and I'll make sure to get to the question earlier about sustaining stakeholder engagement over such a long process. But I wanted to just pause. I know you guys are a technical group. I thought you probably have a lot of questions about the analysis piece. You might not even know where to start, but I'll pause there and see if anyone has any questions for me on that piece.
Leslie, there's a question in the chat about how does the recent declaration of a statewide drought factor into planning?
Of a drought?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you said? Okay, sorry, I'm in your voice is quiet for me. So the drought has not been one of the factors that we've that actually has been like high on our radar for drainage and wastewater. We're usually focused on the opposite end of that spectrum, which is the increase of large and catastrophic rain events in our city, which we're experiencing now and assuming will continue to be more prevalent in the future. But one of the things, with the recent heat wave that happened that really brought to our attention for drainage and wastewater is just how challenging it is for people to, for our crews and our customer service representatives to do their work when it's so hot outside. And so there's definitely an impact on our operational side of the work that we do with the increased heat that is coming because of climate change. And of course, our water line of business does incorporate projections for increased drought in the planning that they do for the water supply side of Seattle Public Utilities. Any other questions or follow up on that one if I didn't answer it quite the way you intended? Nope. All right, I will keep moving. So next I'm going to focus in on the visioning stage of this project. And it's really built from, this shows this little drawing that we have to show the process. I'm going to walk you through each of these steps, the fireside series, community stories, etc. But it's all flowing from that analysis. It's all flowing from us understanding our systems better and understanding our communities better. So I like to show it as a piece of the puzzle here. We got started on our visioning and engagement work, and we had spent a lot of time planning it and deciding what our different strategies were going to be, and had planned to have our big kickoff event for this project in April of 2020. And as you can imagine, we had to change our approach with COVID. And it wasn't just the type of strategies that we could do for engagement, like we couldn't have in-person events anymore. We couldn't have some of the community tours or community build events that we wanted to incorporate into this process. It was also that our communities were in crisis and not focusing on participating in processes like this. So we shifted gears significantly and moved towards obviously a virtual platform for a lot of this engagement, but we also acknowledged that our customers, their focus was in other places, and we try to do a lot more strategic work with specific groups and individuals. And not try to do try to have like so many broad conversations with large groups of people. And getting to the question that was earlier about, having a sustained engagement over time and ensuring that you're not wearing people out by asking them to engage over long periods of time. Another thing that we did was really try to break up the project into pieces so groups could engage with us at each piece and see that what they had shared with us was incorporated into that piece, and then be comfortable that like moving on, other people would come to the table and also represent the community or the different stakeholder voices. So it doesn't have to be the same people each step along the way. When you're talking about a 5-year plan, like different people can sub in and out and participate in their piece and still feel like they've helped influence the process. So I'm going to move through these different pieces. There's a lot of this information's available online for you to peruse if you're interested in the future. And so I'll have on each of the slides here, you'll see on the top right corner, there's a little link for where you could go and learn more about any of these pieces if you're interested in them. So one of the things we did was a 3-part fireside series where we invited experts, local experts and national experts, international experts in one case, to come and present and talk about their expertise and their knowledge and kind of what they thought this project should be in the future. And we had these three different focuses. So the first one focused on local tribal leaders and talked about how their relationship with water has shifted over time. The second one really focused on water justice and what it means to lead with equity in infrastructure projects. And then the third one focused on examples of creating kind of a community vision for long-range planning. And some of those are specific to water and others are, you know, more specific to like park planning and things like that. These are a couple of the quotes that came out of these. And, you know, a lot of times these speaker series events, they feel like, okay, here's someone who's sharing their perspective with us. But these quotes like these are things that we can incorporate into this plan and help us shape the goals and the vision for what this plan is going to be. So it really is an engagement event in that regard, because we have these experts sharing their perspectives, and we can glean from that information and thoughts about how to shape this project. Sort of a non-traditional engagement approach, but we also incorporated a lot of different engaging things in the chat, like asking people questions in the chat, and then those are turned into like what would have been a comment card in a public meeting, if you will. We also developed a series of community stories. These are still under development. We've got 2 of them up on our website now, and there's 8 total that we've done. So the remaining 6 are going to be kind of rolled out over the next couple of weeks. And these are multimedia stories where community members, community leaders share their personal connection to water and why they do the work that they do that relates to water. We partnered with a local team of production partners, so South Seattle Emerald and KVRU, and there's a radio component to each of these stories. You can either read it on South Seattle Emerald's site, or you can listen to the interview itself. And these are really great ways just to understand some of our stakeholders' perspectives, right? So this Magdalena, who's featured here on the slide, works at Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition, and so you know she's sharing her perspective on water. That's information we can incorporate into our planning process as well. Shayla Brown was one of the other folks who participated in this, and you know this quote from her interview and really just nails home how important it is for us to be incorporating equity and environmental justice into the work that we do as a utility. Some of the other more passive engagement approaches that we did, we developed what we call a drainage and wastewater 101. That's our internal name for it. This is, you're seeing the kind of cover of the PDF here, get to know SPU. We found that so many people don't know what we do. They don't know that investment in drainage and wastewater infrastructure is a potential opportunity to invest in open space or mobility improvements. And so we developed this publicly facing 101 document to try to help people understand that our services can positively affect their communities and hopefully get them excited about participating in our planning process. Also developed interactive drainage and wastewater infrastructure map for Seattle. So it highlights a couple of different sites throughout the city where you can, you know, the idea when we developed this, we were all, it feels far away now even, which is wonderful, but we were all mostly at home and encouraged not to go out. So this was a way to go on an infrastructure tour without leaving the comfort of your home. And you know, focused on especially infrastructure that SPU and other community or other people have built that maybe you didn't know you were walking past a swale. You just saw something beautiful in your neighborhood, or maybe you didn't know that that park was providing some sort of stormwater benefit. But this is an opportunity for you to learn about that park more and learn about how drainage and wastewater infrastructure can be a positive part of the urban realm. And in the future, we're going to be adding layers to this map to show watershed history and also to show the synthesis of that analysis stage that I covered earlier. So there'll be pages added to this story map that show where our system challenges and opportunities are, so people can kind of explore through that data through this interface. And then another thing that we did for people who maybe wanted to get out and walk around was we did these walking tours of 3 different areas of the city and the infrastructure in them. So we have one of Madison Valley, one of the High Point neighborhood in West Seattle, and one of Meadowbrook Pond in Northeast Seattle. And you can do them on your smartphone. You show up at the site and it walks you through the different pieces of either the park or the neighborhood, and how stormwater infrastructure has been incorporated into that neighborhood. And then getting to what I was describing before of sort of the more diving into to engagement with a focused group of people, and really getting some good input from representatives of our community, since our communities were spread so thin. What you're seeing here is our design team, which is a group of community leaders who we hired to participate in our process and to share their expertise with us. They worked with us both to design and to implement the Fireside series, which I showed you before. They also ran, Nancy and Michelle, who you see here, both ran a focus group, an intergenerational focus group on behalf of this project. And they also helped us to design and implement a 2-day convening around setting the goals and the vision for this project. So, they not only helped us with the design of our events, but they also helped ensure that they were appropriate for the communities that they represent, and helped with recruiting and facilitation, and are now helping us also with distilling all of the feedback that we've gotten through all of these engagement pieces, so that we're not just working within our SPU bubble and back at our desks thinking by ourselves. We're actually working actively with people outside the organization to make sure that we're held accountable to incorporating what we heard from community into the process that we're going through. So here's just quickly on the focus group that Nancy and Michelle ran for this project. This is hired a graphic facilitator, and you've seen some of the drawings that she's done in these process diagrams I've been walking you through. But she took live notes at the event, and this is the kind of idea generation that happened at our focus groups. You can see us. This is how we're kind of gathering input and hearing from community about what's important to them and what they want this project to be about. And then we also hosted this digital convening, and in this case, we brought together, invited stakeholders from various nonprofit organizations, environmental stakeholders, representatives from other city department, and we went through a 2-day, it's sort of like a conference, right? Like a set of presentations and breakout discussions and stuff like that, focused on resilience and infrastructure investment and how to provide multiple benefits through infrastructure investment. So here you're seeing some of that sort of the raw feedback that we got through the discussions that happened there. And right now we're in the process of synthesizing all of this input. Like I said, we're doing it with our design team and pulling it together into this visioning document, which will have the vision and goals that will then be used to shape the remainder of the Shape Our Water project, and like be our guidepost for how we develop our 50-year plan for water resilience. So that document we're in the process of drafting it now, and it should be, you might see if you've been tracking the little hyperlinks that I put in the corner of each of the slides. This one doesn't have one because we don't have a public version of it yet, but later this summer we'll be putting it up on the website and kind of bringing it around to folks other than our design team to get input and make sure that it's reflective of what our broad group of stakeholders had to say about the project. So I guess at this point, I just pause to go back to the great question that was asked earlier about how long this process takes and how we sustain engagement over time. I mean, I think one of the things that we've done here is try to create materials for engagement that won't go stale and that could easily get people to a place where they're able to drop in and participate in future steps if they haven't participated in the past. And also kind of an out for people like the design team members. If they want to continue working with us, they can. But if they decide, like, I put in my time on this project, like I feel good about this visioning document, you know, I'm going to leave it to other people to step in and help SPU figure out how to turn these goals and objectives into a plan. They can, knowing that they see this visioning document, it reflects the input and the work that they did, and they can trust that it will be kind of folded into the steps that come above. So, or come after, not above. So Brian, not the greatest answer to your tough question, but that's the best answer I have. And at that point, I just have a couple of slides on what's coming next. And I know we only have a couple minutes left of the presentation, but I do just want to pause and see if anyone has any burning questions related to all that engagement stuff that I just shared with you.
There's a question in the chat. Leslie, can you see it? Do you want me to read it out?
If you could read it, that'd be great, Ayman, because I only have one screen, so I just have this full screen presentation.
Okay. So a question from Natalia, and Natalia, feel free to unmute yourself and ask this question or elaborate. So she's asking, is any of the water quality work focused on making the Puget Sound area swimmable in all locations, or will there always be dead zones for sewage overflow, non-point source runoff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that thank you for that question. So the work that comes out of this plan will definitely incorporate ongoing combined sewer overflow reduction, and that's one of the main ways that we, as a utility, have an impact on the swimmability of the receiving water bodies in Seattle. So we are continuing to invest and will continue to invest in the future on reducing the number of times a year on average our city discharges combined sewage into our water bodies. That's a huge driver for us. It remains a huge driver for us, and is something we're very committed to continue doing. SPU there's like a limited amount that is under our control related to the swimmability of our water bodies. Our partner, King County, is also a big player in water quality protection in Seattle as our wastewater treatment provider, and also as the manager of the sort of trunk line combined sewer overflow system in the city. And there's just a lot of different factors involved in water quality, and we're one contributor to water quality issues, and we're also one contributor to trying to improve water quality, but we do it in partnership with a lot of other people who are also doing it. So yes, we're going to keep working on that, but we can't do it alone. Any other questions before I move on to our next steps?
Maybe because of time, how about you cover those last couple of slides and then we'll take more questions.
Got it, Ayman, thank you. So our next step is planning. This stage hasn't quite begun yet, but it will directly build off of our analysis and visioning stages, and we'll continue engaging our communities and our stakeholders throughout the next steps in the process, which you see here on the right. Equity will continue to be central to our process. We're getting started on this pretty imminently. We're in the process of scoping it right now, and it's about a 2-year process. So our goal is to finish by the end of 2023, if not sooner. I'm going to go through the steps that were on that process really quickly. So the first step is, we have all this information about the challenges and problems in our system. So the first step in this planning process is identifying the solutions that to all of those problems, to all those high priority problems. So we'll be doing that with SPU staff as well as city staff and other stakeholders. We're really focusing on incremental approaches, programmatic approaches, and partnerships as a first approach to solving these. This is a 50-year plan, and so we want to do things that will kind of pay off over time, not just big investments over the next 5 years. And so we're going to be looking really closely at incentive programs, tinkering with our requirements for development, that kind of thing as a first step. And we'll look at project concepts kind of as a secondary approach if those programmatic approaches aren't going to get us where we need to go. From there, we group those solutions into alternatives and evaluate them based on how well they meet the goals that we identified through this visioning stage. And of course, we'll be looking at financial planning and also kind of long-term rate impacts of the different alternatives that we develop. And then we select a preferred alternative from the bunch. We'll do that in partnership with our stakeholders as well. And likely this will end up being a hybrid of the alternatives that were developed and evaluated before. And then the last step is the implementation plan. So we see this as having two parts along a long-term sequence of actions because it is a 50-year plan. What are we doing long-term and where do we want to go? And then short-term, what's the action plan for the next 6 years? And that aligns with our capital budget and our O&M budget planning time horizon. So it should really drive that budgeting process in years to come. We'll also have a financial plan, and this is especially important in terms of finding funding for the work that we need to do from a variety of places like grants and other things like that. And then because it's a long range plan, we're going to be incorporating adaptive management into the process. So we'll be revisiting the plan over time and updating that short-term action plan on a recurring basis based on new data and information that we have. And then lastly, we will select performance measures that we use to track and communicate our progress and guide our decision-making and inform adaptive management in the future. So all this is still real high level because we're just scoping the details of this now, but this is sort of just giving you a preview of what that planning process is going to look like. That is it. So with that, I'll stop sharing if I can find how to do that. There we go. And see if there are other, I guess we're at our time. So I'm not sure if maybe there's one quick question I could answer it, or otherwise you can just say goodbye.
Any quick questions to Leslie before we wrap it up? This one quick question I have for you, Leslie, is you mentioned that the equity framework was put together before COVID. So is there any plan to revisit that equity framework to make sure that whether some of the new marginalized communities or communities that were not considered marginalized before, and maybe an example of that, like local small businesses, might need to have a say in the plan moving forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question, Ayman. Yeah, we definitely have places designed into the process over the next 2 years where we'll be revisiting that equity framework and ensuring that we're updating it and focusing on the right places to create the most equitable outcomes in this process.
Great. So if we don't have any other questions, so I'd like to thank Leslie for a wonderful presentation. Really nice visuals. I have to admit, I'm kind of jealous. I might steal some of those visuals from my next slides. So today we heard from Leslie on the SPU's plan for the city for the next 50 years to make Seattle's water more resilient. She talked about the core services that the city provides in drainage and wastewater, and talked about how the city is proactively looking or is proactively working to address not only regulatory drivers, but also some of the internal and external pressures on the system, like climate change, affordability, and equity. So really interesting plan, really interesting project. There's a lot going on. It seems like there's still starting. There are a lot more information on the project's website, which I shared a link to in the chat. Leslie, I don't know if your information were there, but can people contact you if they have questions?
Yeah, it was on my last slide, but I kind of pulled it down quickly. So you're welcome to put it in the chat if that's the easiest way. My email is leslie.webster@seattle.gov. So it's pretty easy. Yeah.
Yep, I'll put it in the chat. So thanks again, Leslie, for a great presentation. Next month, we'll have a technical presentation from Bob Butcher from King County to talk about the development of aerobic granule sludge process for biological nutrient removal. So completely different topic.
Yeah.
Dive into a lot more technical stuff. So thanks again, Leslie, and thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you all next month.
Thanks, Simon.
Bye.